Hello, and welcome to The Update, Grants Pass's first podcast episode, where Grants Pass stays informed, engaged, and moving forward together. I'm Aaron Kubik, your city manager, and I'm excited to kick off this new way for us to connect with you, the residents, business owners, and partners who make our community great. This podcast is part of our ongoing effort to increase transparency, strengthen community engagement, and make it easier for everyone to stay informed about what's happening in Grants Pass. Each episode will give you highlights from recent council meetings, updates on city projects and programs, and conversations with people doing the work behind the scenes. In this episode, Understanding the City's Unhoused Grant Program, we're talking about a topic that's important and often misunderstood: how the city is approaching homelessness services and what it really means to operate a managed versus an unmanaged resting site. We'll start with a quick council meeting recap with Councilor Seth Benham, then talk with Sam Engel, Executive Director of Rogue Retreat, on how management can make a real difference, both for those experiencing homelessness and for the surrounding community. And finally, we'll hear from City Attorney Stephanie Nuttall about the city's Addressing Homelessness Grant Program. Thanks for tuning in. To start off today's episode, we're doing a quick recap of this week's City Council meeting. Each episode will invite a different council member to share highlights from the latest meeting to help explain what decisions were made and talk a little bit about what's coming up next. I'm joined today by Councilor Seth Benham, who serves on the non-bargaining task force and on the board for the Main Street Grants Pass. He's also a local business owner, and he's here today with the experience of also being able to talk about two of the key topics that were addressed during our meeting. Seth, thanks for being here. Can you give our listeners a quick overview of the main items council covered this week and some of the key takeaways from your perspective?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Wednesday night, it was another exciting meeting. Obviously, always.
They always are.
Every time.
I mean, more and more people are tuning in.
Yeah, it's becoming quite popular. We started off with designating the giant sequoia at the Grants Pass water treatment as a heritage tree. So that went through, that passed, flying colors. And then, we went into our exciting resolution authorizing 14, correct? 14?
Yeah, that was quite a bit of work for us to cover and get signatures ready to go the following day. We had, I think, 14 resolutions.
Yeah, 14 resolutions authorizing the sale of easements to ODOT for some of their curb ramp replacement. I think people have seen that around town of the different intersections that ODOT owns and the current replacements they've done for the ADA lawsuit.
And you just mentioned lawsuit. This is spurred based on of a lawsuit. They're having to replace all ADA ramps throughout the state of Oregon. It's quite a task.
Yeah, I saw some of the numbers. I was like, I don't know how you do that in that short amount of time.
Right.
And then, we had the resolution authorizing funding of up to $100,000 for 1 year to Main Street Grants Pass. So that was obviously one of the big topics of the night, as you can tell. So ultimately, council cut that in half to $50,000 and voted to approve that to Main Street Grants Pass. So
we had quite a bit of public input on that one also. I was quite impressed with the number of people that were there to support the program.
Yeah. I don't even know. I mean, I think since I've been on council, that was probably tops, or at least ties with the most public comment we've had for one item on the agenda, I think. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's up there.
It is exciting to see that groundswell of excitement and energy for something like creating a Main Street for downtown.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for economic development, business growth, tax growth, all those things. And then, after that, we went to the non-bargaining salary schedule vote for the COLA for this year.
Yes.
I made a motion on Monday's workshop to put that into place. We obviously met I was on the task force, and we met for a handful of months. And we did great work, and I think everyone worked together well. And I don't disagree with our work. I just, I could see that the appetite potentially on Monday wasn't there for the whole thing. So, I wanted to get something done.
So why don't you, maybe for our listeners, just give a little background so at least they have that piece of what the charge of the task force was, what are they actually looking at, and what were they trying to do?
Yeah, the charge of the task force was to kind of look at the current suggestions from McGrath, which was our consultant that came in for the non-bargaining salary, and in which she went in and looked at comparable cities in salary ranges, and also reclassified certain staff into different kind of buckets, you could say. Yeah. And so, we went in to just kind of look at that. I think, in the beginning, there's potentially a lot of questions and concerns about it. So there's 6 of us, me and Rick, Councilor Riker, and 4 citizens and community members. And, we had a great conversation throughout all our meetings. We worked really closely with the city attorney as well as a labor attorney from outside of the city. Really just reviewed that. We realized that McGrath's recommendations made sense. And so we took those and, we were really just trying to figure out, okay, what makes sense, where, what needs to be fixed. We worked on the grid and the placements on the grid and how that works. And even for future employees too, I think we came up with some solutions moving forward. Yeah. And so ultimately, the recommendation from the task force, came in a little bit less than what was recommended, I think back in March or whenever this originally came up. And that was the recommendation. And, and then it was up to council at that point, right? What are we going to do? What do we want to move forward or do we want to change it? And like I said, I just could sense that potentially there would be no movement on Monday. I wanted to give something, and I said this on Wednesday. I wanted to give something, at least in the interim, to staff, just so they know that we support them. Obviously it's a big dollar value, and I think too. I think before the task force was even formed, it's been 13 years or something since the study was done.
It's been quite a while. You're right, and we tried to do something in between, and we were able to get a couple of extra steps in the salary structure, but it didn't actually fix.
Yeah,
the
so
issue.
I mean, we're just kind of at this point when it's it's a high dollar value that we just need to figure out. I think ultimately, and so. I think getting the COLA was important just right off the bat. Just get that in and get that approved, and then we'll go back and I think too. Like I want to say that the task force's recommendation still stands in my point of view, and I didn't make that motion to disregard what the task force had recommended. I think that council is going to go back and review what the task force recommended. And go from there and potentially approve it, deny it, change it. But I could sense that, they just had more questions. So I think the task force probably is potentially over. It's more just in council's discretion now.
Well, it is a big issue and it does have financial impact. And so it sounds like council took a first initial step, and there's some more work to do when it comes to taking a look at the task force's full recommendation, and that'll be taken care of in future business meetings. Yeah.
And I also wouldn't consider this necessarily kicking the can down the road. I really want to get this solved. And so hopefully that's in the near future. I think the task force did make really good progress and put in some good work on the recommendation.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you and Councilor Riker and the citizens who volunteered, because you did spend a lot of time on that. Greatly appreciate you stepping up and trying to create a solution to this issue that we're dealing with. So that was a great recap of the meeting Wednesday, and we actually did some pretty cool things. Celebrated a tree and did a great partnership with ODOT. Are there anything coming up that the citizens should be aware of? Any neat things coming up or anything that council might want some feedback on?
Yeah, well, we've got a lot coming up. Monday, we've got a special workshop, and this is where we will be interviewing the grant applicants for the Addressing Homelessness grant.
Oh, yes, that's what this podcast is focusing on. So coming up after our interview here, we'll be going in much detail about that.
Yes. Yeah, so that's gonna be a big one. You know, I mean, that's been obviously on the docket for a while. You know, we reissued the grant, and now it's kind of up to council. I mean, you know, we're individually scoring and sifting through the applications right now.
We're excited to see that process unfold and hopefully get a solution to this issue.
Yeah, you know, I really hope that something positive comes out of this. You know, I don't think we'll ever solve the issue as the city of Grants Pass, but we can make it sustainable, hopefully.
Yeah.
Something long term that's not, you know, what obviously we currently have, and something that, you know, the citizens can get behind.
Yeah, definitely.
And then November 1st, you know, I've been sort of a part of this just from, you know, working in tourism and helping that side of the spectrum for Grants Pass, but there's the Dollar Mountain grand opening.
Oh, yes.
On November 1st. Yeah.
That's a big deal, actually. We've been working on that for a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a mountain biker myself. I don't take that kind of risk, but
it is actually risky. It can be dangerous.
I do know a lot of people that are. So I've heard that it's, you know, it's going to be one of the kind of top destinations, you know, at least in Southern Oregon and maybe on I-5 for mountain biking.
Yeah, this is something that I know previous councils, this council has been working on. We just developed 13 miles of trails up there, and it's going to be a great grand opening. And it is, like you mentioned, my understanding is we're trying to gear this to where it is a destination area for mountain bikers.
Yeah, I think ultimately, you know, the goal is to bring tourism, right? To bring people from outside.
Yeah.
You know, because people that are into mountain biking, I mean, you know, just like any hobby or anything you do, I mean, you get into it, you spend a lot of money and you want to have fun and go to, you know, different locations. So
yeah.
I think it's cool that, you know, they can come here, they can hopefully stay in Grants Pass and experience everything that we have to offer.
That's awesome. So that's coming up November 1st, you said?
Yep. It's at 10 a.m. Hagelin Loop parking lot.
Awesome.
Yes.
I hope to see people there. I know I'm going to be there. That's going to be exciting.
I'm going to try. So, yeah.
All right. Any other updates or anything you'd like to highlight?
No, I don't think so. I'm just excited to be, this is the first episode. So I think it's exciting, and I think it'll be cool moving forward, and it's a good way to get the information out.
Thanks, Seth. I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through those highlights and for the work you and the rest of council are doing to move these issues forward. As we shift into the next part of today's episode, we want to take a closer look at one of the most pressing and complex issues facing our city, homelessness. The city of Grants Pass has become a focal point in the national conversation around homelessness, particularly as it relates to how cities can and cannot regulate public space. For years, we've been navigating court injunctions that limit our ability to enforce local laws regarding the use of city property by individuals experiencing homelessness. Under Oregon law, specifically ORS 195.530, also known as House Bill 3115, any city that regulates acts like sitting, lying, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry on public property must do so in a way that is objectively reasonable in the terms of time, place, and manner. In fact, the court has defined objectively reasonable for our city as providing 150 ADA-compliant resting sites. As a result, the city is expending substantial resources to meet this mandate, including funding for locations, sanitation, and basic services, all while facing real challenges like increased crime and limited capacity to address the underlying issues of substance abuse and mental health. To respond to this, the city has developed the Addressing Homelessness Grant Program, a strategic initiative aimed at improving how we manage these sites and support those in need. But to really understand what this means, we need to talk about the difference between what we currently have, unmanaged sites, and what a managed site looks like in practice. To help us answer those questions, I'm joined now by Sam Engel, Executive Director of Rogue Retreat. Sam has been a leader in developing and operating managed sites in Southern Oregon and brings a wealth of experience in what works, what doesn't, and what communities like ours can learn. Sam, welcome to the show.
Aaron, thank you very much for having me.
So, for listeners who might not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit about Rogue Retreat and the kind of work your organization does in Southern Oregon?
Yeah, happy to. So first off, Rogue Retreat started in 1998. A lot of people think of Rogue Retreat as kind of having started in 2015, 2016, when we opened our first low barrier program. But we started in 1998 with shared housing. that was higher barrier. People had to pay to be part of it. They had a sobriety requirement. And then we responded to community need by opening more types of transitional housing. And then when the community need demanded it, when asked for it, starting to open lower barrier programs in 2016, and then the managed campground in 2020.
So sounds like you've been very busy.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're very familiar with this community. I think you live in this community, and so do I. And we currently have some unmanaged sites. And we're seeing a lot of impact to our community with our sites versus I've been to your site. You've given me a tour. Much different. I mean, here in Grants Pass, it seems like our sites have and come with it public safety issues and additional crime. We have sanitation and environmental issues. There's a lack of services to our sites. And there's definitely community frustration and political pressures associated with this. And I think from an operational perspective, it's not extremely efficient. So if, to put you on the spot, if an elevator speech, in 30 seconds to a minute or something like that, can you please tell the listeners what they would expect different between an unmanaged site that we have here and your managed site? What is the key differences? Because I think it's a key point again to try to reinforce that where the city is going is we're wanting to go sort of where Rogue Retreat is now. We're wanting to put in and through this grant process incentivize a managed facility. And so with that, wherever that location is, what is the key difference between what we have now and what we're looking at trying to achieve?
A managed site has the goal of helping somebody get out of homelessness. And I think oftentimes an unmanaged site or a resting site really has the goal of getting people out of a park or out of a place you don't want them, which is different. There's an unwanted aspect to an unmanaged site. There's a wanted aspect, like we want you here, we want to help you, and we want you to, leave here positively. We want you to go about your life, and we want to be part of that journey, but it's your journey. And you've got to put the work in. But we will be there to help you. We'll believe in you until you're ready to believe in yourself. We won't work harder than you're working, but we want to see you in our community at your highest potential. And we'll be part of that, and we'll help you do that. And I would encourage anybody who has questions about what this looks like, how it feels, to come take a tour.
Oh, that's great.
Come to our website, call us up, email Hannah, HANNAH, @rogueretreat.org, and she'll set you up with a tour.
We're trying to get to a managed site, and your sites look much different than our sites.
So what the managed site does is it has 24/7 staffing. It has the program components of case management, of peer support specialty, and peers are people who have lived experience and have enough distance between them and their drug use. They've got enough sobriety time that they're in a very good place in their lives to come in and help other people take their next steps. And the goal is to help move people through shelter, through transitional housing, into independent housing, and then out of our program entirely. And then that's really where our success comes from, is helping people figure out what their path is going to be and then take those steps out. And we have a pretty high percentage of success. And that's really the difference you see in managed and unmanaged, is unmanaged programs, it's entirely up to the individual in a really difficult environment to try and figure out how to get out of homelessness. In a managed site, you've got support structure built around you to help you take those next steps.
So thinking back a few years ago when I visited your one site, you had a site over more closer to the airport off Middle Road or something along those lines. And when I remember visiting it, it was like right at the end of the greenway sort of, and it was a fenced area. It had some tents and some larger tents for some common area and things like that. And it still had, it seemed like some people mingling around every once in a while in the green area and stuff. And then I go to your new site, and I had a hard time finding it because it blended in with what looked like surrounded by residential. And it was night and day difference. And can you tell me a little bit about the difference between those two sites maybe, and what kind of neighbor you are in this new site? And are you really surrounded sort of in a residential area right now?
Yeah. So first off, yeah, we're in a commercial residential area. So we have residential neighbors on one side, we have a city property on another side, we've got a commercial lot on the third side, and then we've got another commercial program, a preschool across the street. Which a lot of folks will say you can't put these two services near each other. But the reality is you've got a whole bunch of people who are trying to make these next steps in their life. And they are as interested in being good community partners, usually, and neighbors, as anybody else in that neighborhood is. And they're held to a higher degree of scrutiny than most neighbors who have purchased or rented their own home. When we came into that neighborhood, one of the things I think was really successful for us is we spent a lot of time talking to law enforcement. We invited neighbors to be part of a steering committee. We'd done a couple of these projects before, so we had learned from that experience. We knocked on 360 doors. And we went out with law enforcement, with community volunteers, and said, hey, we're Rogue Retreat. Have you heard of us? We're going to be coming into your neighborhood. What are your thoughts? And we had about a third of the folks that we talked to had a pretty positive response. About 25% had a negative response or neutral negative. And then about half of the people we talked to, it was pretty on the fence or leaning positive. So we had about a 75% neutral or positive response rate, which was pretty good. The favorite comments that I got from that were people who said, oh yeah, I was in your program 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were neighbors renting a house, which is ideal. But again, just open communication has really made that neighbor impact strong.
So big, strong partnership. When you're talking about finding your location and any kind of mitigation work, you were working with the city and hand in hand.
Yep.
City law enforcement were going around the neighborhoods and getting that impact and talking to them about their concerns.
Yeah. Yeah, and we went out in groups of 3 or 4, usually a staff member, a member of law enforcement or a volunteer with law enforcement, and then either a board member or a community member. And just, partially for our own safety, but then also partially so that we had enough people in that little group to answer as many questions as possible. We left flyers behind so people could send us feedback later, and we took that seriously. A year or so later, we had an open house, and we asked people to come back in, take a look at the site, let us know your thoughts a year later. And then again, some of the best comments we got were, I didn't realize you'd opened yet.
So, wow, that's a really good, and that brings up, I guess, a question that I have, because I get a lot of comments and council gets a lot of comments and concerns about the activity that occurs around our sites, whether it be a block away to a half a mile away, of people transitioning throughout the neighborhoods, et cetera. And so some people are really worried about what a resting site brings. Does it bring more problems into a neighborhood? Based on your experience with your site that you have, what true impact does it have to a neighborhood?
Anything you put into a neighborhood is going to change the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. It could be a Chuck E. Cheese, and it's going to change traffic flow, and it's going to change parking, and you're going to get phone calls because it's going to change your neighborhood. We added 150 people, plus staff vehicles, plus community partners into the neighborhood. And so we're trying to beautify the neighborhood. We've also taken a vacant lot that wasn't being used, and now we put it to a good use. We also know people who have been active in either drugs and alcohol or have been homeless in Medford for a long time. That field was where people used to hide from the cops when they were getting busted for something else. And so we took what had been once upon a time a detriment to the community and made it a benefit to the community. And I think a lot of times when people are worried about what it's going to be close to, how it's going to impact them, they're only looking at the negative and frequently ignoring the positive. We work with Medford Livability, very similar to the CRT up in Grants Pass and Josephine County, the crisis response team. We got, by the end of August this year, we had 296 referrals from Medford Livability. And those are people that they've run into, doing well checks, seeing how people are, and then they've referred those folks over into our program. We can't take everyone in because we're usually full. But of the people that came in, 44.2% of those people successfully moved into more stable housing or shelter or have remained stably sheltered. Of the 56% of the folks who haven't done that, many of those are the same people coming in over and over. Some people, it takes 2 or 3 or 4 tries before they're ready to make that change.
So what I'm hearing from that is there's two things that have helped with success potentially from your old site to your new site. And one is the partnership with the city in referrals and getting people to those services. And then also it sounded like even the site and the site location and the amenities around also had an impact on the success.
Yes. The biggest difference between the old site and the new site is more dignity. And that's one of the biggest differences between managed and unmanaged sites is the human impact, the dignity, and then recognizing what people want in their lives. Most people don't want to be in a resting site.
What about like, because we're talking about, you mentioned the evening, what about controlled access? So with our unmanaged sites, individuals are free to come and go 24/7. Is there any kind of controlled access at your sites that maybe would reduce the amount of traffic in the late evening, early mornings?
Yes. So we tend to go by behavioral guidelines that have a logical reason behind them. So City of Medford, much like the City of Grants Pass, has a 10 o'clock noise ordinance.
Yes.
So we ask people to be in by 9 o'clock so that they can take a shower, feed their dog, walk their, whatever it is that they need to do to be quiet by 10. Ideally, the same as all of our neighbors.
That's a good neighbor. All right.
We try to, We're not always perfectly successful, but we try to. Now, we're reasonable. A lot of the folks that are at crossings work, or they visit family. Bus routes can be difficult. And so we also ask people, if they know they're going to be late, let us know, which is the advantage of 24/7 staffing. And so we try and balance that out, recognizing that we need to be good neighbors, just as much as anybody else. Rogue Retreat also has kind of our signature white vinyl fence we put up around our sites. We want to be one of the best looking things in the neighborhood. So that's another way that we try and add part of that. And then that's also for the benefit of our guests. So just like Foundry Village here in town, that way people aren't looking through the fence at folks.
Are there particular metrics or outcomes you track? Fewer police calls, better client transitions? It sounds like you do from a standpoint of your tracking success rates. What about, do you in the city track any kind of calls for service when it comes to public safety type of stuff in the neighborhoods and how that works?
We've looked at that a little bit. That's not always as helpful as I'd like it to be. Sometimes the calls go up, especially when a program first opens. The calls tend to go up for the first 6 months at least, partially because everybody's paying attention. And so people are calling more frequently about things.
Right.
You've also added 150 people to your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so that's 150 more people who are likely to potentially have a heart attack. A lot of our folks come with pretty complicated health issues. And so we do have medical calls regularly. Medical calls often frequently involve law enforcement as well. And so the calls often go up. But the severity of the calls is usually, again, about taking care of somebody who's in crisis, who's needing something, somebody who's got complex mental health issues, and they need to go get those addressed. But those calls are happening safely.
Yeah.
And the other side is that sometimes those calls are a good indication that somebody is getting a need met, which is hard because if you just look at those numbers of calls, it looks bad because they frequently go up. But people are getting better care, better access to care, and then long-term, that individual ends up needing less emergency department care. They need less crisis care frequently, and they end up being healthier because now they're using some of those emergency responder calls, and then we're using that as part of case management to get them connected with a primary care provider.
It feels as though your system, the way you have it established, really reduces any kind of negative impacts to communities and really increases the success rate and the humanity of someone that's unhoused getting out of the unhoused situation while still being as positive as an impact to a community as possible.
We really try to, and I think we're pretty successful. And a big part of that is that our job is to serve the whole community. Homeless people are part of our whole community. And a lot of times they're kids who grew up here, and now those kids happen to be 26 or 36 or 50 years old. We've also seen about a 25% increase in folks that are 55 and older. And a lot of those people are from our community. Again, they've lived here for decades. And I think that's one of the big mental shifts that needs to happen in a community to really address a crisis, is to see everyone in your community as part of it. And so as a parent with kids in Grants Pass, I want to see a Grants Pass that is investing in those outcomes and is showing our kids that this is how we care for people and this is how we care for community. And one of the programs we run is called Hope Streets. And we hire people typically starting at minimum wage. And then people can earn raises like any other job, to go out and clean up streets, storefronts, businesses. We work on contracts. We do some big parking lots. And we won an award recently from the Downtown Medford Association for helping to beautify downtown Medford.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and people love this because sometimes it's the same person who used to be making a mess in or near your business. And now that person is coming back. They're proud of themselves. They're helping your business look good. And then you are paying for a service. And you're getting a service, but you're also helping to improve your community at the same time. And yeah, it was really quite the honor to get that recognition from the DMA. And then I'm really excited that not only, picking up trash, but now we're being asked if we would help kind of bring the next level of beauty into downtown Medford too. They're contracting our Hope Streets crew to do their Christmas lights this year.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the first time we're announcing this publicly is right here. But really excited about this, and the guys are really excited, and they're playing with designs, and it'll be really fun to see kind of to see them recognized in the community in a different way. There's something different about picking up trash, which is noble, and it makes a big difference. But then there's another element where you've been asked to come in and be part of a celebration. So that feels pretty good.
That is really neat. We do something very similar here in Grants Pass with the Mission.
Mm-hmm.
We have a contract with the Mission, and they go through and go through our downtown area every morning. You'll see them with the safety jackets on, picking up trash and those kind of things, and exploring opportunities for us to expand that to community events and stuff. That's something that we may take and see if we can run with that. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Sam, I really appreciate your insight. What I take away from this is that management brings accountability, safety, and dignity, not just for those using the site, but for the whole community around it. And that's exactly the kind of progress we want to see here in Grants Pass.
Yeah, and if I were to add one more thing to it, it's that homelessness or poverty isn't a life sentence. It's a moment in time. And, that person's life is built up of a million moments, beautiful or difficult, and we want this moment in their life to be as short as possible, so that they have as many good moments ahead as they can.
Great. Sam, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm joined next by our City Attorney, Stephanie Nuttall, who's been deeply involved in the city's efforts on the grant application implementation process. We'll talk about what this funding means for Grants Pass, how it works, and what residents can expect to see as a result. Stephanie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Stephanie, for listeners who may not be familiar, can you start by explaining what this grant is and how it came about?
Sure. The grant is an effort by the city to provide some startup assistance to an entity that would be able to provide shelter and coordinate services for homeless individuals. We don't currently have anything that's low barrier. Oregon law requires that if the city wants to regulate things like sitting, lying, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry on public property, we have to be objectively reasonable with regards to persons experiencing homelessness. And this essentially means that people have to have a low barrier place to go. The city's not the appropriate entity to be providing shelter to these individuals, and so we're trying to help get a better solution up and running. And the grant is a competitive process where entities can provide a proposal to provide those shelter and services that they think meet the city's needs.
Wow. Okay, you sound like an attorney. So
Sure am.
let me dive in a little more. So, really, what is the purpose behind pursuing this grant? I mean, what problem are we trying to solve with these funds?
We're trying to give the people across the street from City Hall a place to go that's not just a tent city on a vacant lot.
Roughly how much funding is involved and what types of activities and improvements does this allow?
So we're offering up to $1.2 million for capital expenditures. And capital expenditures are things like the acquisition, upgrade, or immediate maintenance of physical assets. So things like buildings, real property, infrastructure, technology. So we want to help get that managed site up and running. It's not to be used for things like operations, so personnel, wages, benefits, food, utility bills, services, support, marketing, outreach, things like that are not acceptable expenses with this funding. We just want to make sure that that structure and infrastructure is there to help people.
Okay, so that hardscape, the real stuff you can touch and feel, not operations at all.
Correct.
So this is our second round for the RFP grant process.
It is.
We already had one, and it seems as though a benefit from the second round is additional transparency. Could you explain the additional transparency in this process?
Sure. The transparency piece was a big part of why we're on a second round. What it means is that the city council itself is going to be acting as the review panel for scoring. So the interviews, the scoring, all those components are going to happen in a public meeting. And in fact, they're going to happen on Monday, October 20th at 11:45. So that also means that because we're providing the materials to council in advance of that meeting, they're also available for public records requests. So we did redact some specific property location and negotiation information out, but the applications are out there, unlike the first go round when those were behind the scenes. As far as the accountability goes, we also have additional rules in our RFP, and failing to follow those rules can result in disqualification. So one of the components that council is going to be discussing on Monday is whether any applicant has failed to meet the rules. And again, that's going to happen in a public meeting where everyone can see what's going on.
So you and I are very familiar with RFPs. We've been doing it for years, and
Yes.
This is definitely a different process and way to go about reviewing this. I know from a standpoint of our experience, the RFPs come in and staff has a scoring criteria, and we score those and make recommendations to council. They usually adopt those larger RFPs through resolution. In this process, as you mentioned, this is all in a public meeting. So people can come to this workshop and be present, and or they can get online and watch council going through the process of scoring and interviewing the applicants?
Absolutely. I've never seen it done this way before, but I think in this unique situation where it's such a critical component of what we're dealing with in Grants Pass, it's an important piece on this one.
So talking about the application and approval process, since we're sort of going down that road, what is the process like for applying for this grant? Who's involved, and what kind of information or planning does it require?
The application process is very intensive. It requires a lot of planning and on a very short timeline. So you have to have a fully formed and viable proposal within, I think we gave them a little over 4 weeks. I think 5 weeks is what was provided on this go round. So the RFP was issued on September 4th. Applications were due October 9th. In that time, they had to provide detailed responses to questions about the need for the project, the proposed location, whether necessary approvals could in fact be obtained, the physical site plan, their actual timeline for implementation, what amenities and activities would be provided, what data they were going to be collecting, and details about their budget. They also had to develop a memorandum of understanding between the applicant and the partners about who was going to do what. Provide a letter of experience explaining interventions with homeless populations, have references, and provide a risk assessment so that we could evaluate whether it was a good entity to provide funding to. And like I said before, the timeline's really aggressive because the city wants to see that 150 capacity within 6 months of entering into a contract. So that's a very short timeline to get something like this up and running.
That does sound pretty quick for such a big operation. So can you talk us through what kind of review or approval steps occur before the grantee can actually start using the funds? We're not just going to provide $1.2 million.
No, not at all. What's going to happen is we've got 4 applications. Those are now in the review period. So the city council's doing the review. The applications were provided to the city council, and they're going to be doing some preliminary scoring in advance of Monday's meeting. In the meantime, staff is also reviewing the applications and going to provide comments to the council about the proposed location, code compliance, whether or not the risk management meets best practices as far as funding would go. We're also contacting all of the applicant references that were identified, and all of the information is going to be provided to council in a memo probably later today. So after that, we meet Monday starting at 11:45, and during that meeting, council's going to receive brief presentations from applicants and have an opportunity to interview those applicants about their proposals. They will then amongst themselves discuss the scoring components for each of the applications and provide their final scores. They're going to be able to update those preliminary scores that they did. So you want them coming in having read the applications, but then they can update as discussion warrants. When that's done, we'll find out who the highest scoring applicant is, and then they will provide direction to staff about next steps. Ideally, that's going to be to proceed with developing a contract with an applicant. That's not necessarily the guaranteed outcome, though. They could decide to pause or cancel the process, but hopefully we'll be coming out of that with direction for a contract. Once a contract is developed, we anticipate bringing that back to council on November 13th, having it fully executed by November 15th, and that 6-month timeline then would give us a shelter hopefully by May 15th of 2026. So late next spring, we might have a solution to the resting sites.
That's exciting. That sounds like a very aggressive timeline, though, also.
Absolutely.
So things could change a little bit, but that's ultimately our optimistic look at how quick this could happen.
Yes.
With ultimately something in place come mid-May.
Yep.
That sounds very exciting. So can you explain what kind of accountability and reporting comes with this funding? Because what I've heard from people talking to me is if the city is giving $1.2 million, what kind of guarantees do we have that is going to be utilized appropriately? And let's say something just totally goes awry. Is there a way that the city's dollars are protected?
A few things on that, and to some extent it's going to depend on the proposal, because if they're looking for funding for land acquisition, that goes one route. If they're looking for funding for renovating a building, it goes another. So it kind of depends on what we're looking at funding. The reporting piece is easy. There's going to be quarterly reports, annual presentations about how this is working, but the funding is going to be tied to milestones or to actual needs. So if you can't get the property without having the funding, then the city would put the funding into escrow to make sure that it's being used only for that purpose. We're going to try to do as much on a reimbursement basis as possible. So they have to front the money, and then if it's an appropriate expenditure, the funding would be reimbursed. So they're not going to just get a blank check to do whatever they want with. But there also would be accountability. If something goes awry and this falls apart, either they're not meeting milestones or they're not providing the services, then we can potentially withhold funding, or even possibly the city would take over and make sure that those services in the shelter continues moving forward to keep the homeless off our parks and off our resting sites.
So what a great amount of information. It really sounds like, one, we've thought about a lot of issues when it comes to utilizing public dollars, the opportunity for the public to be able to really see what's happening through this process, and an option for us to really change the dynamic on how we're serving the unhoused in a relatively aggressive timeline, with it happening potentially in mid-May.
Yes, we've done a lot of work to try to make this the best solution for the city of Grants Pass that we can.
That's exciting. I'm looking forward to this process. And Stephanie, I want to thank you for walking us through that. It's clear that there's a lot of thought, coordination, and oversight involved in making sure this funding is used effectively and responsibly.
Thank you.
That wraps up our first episode of The Update, City of Grants Pass podcast. I want to thank our guests, City Councilor Seth Benham, for our council meeting update, and City Attorney Stephanie Nuttall. Also, I'd like to thank Sam Engel from Rogue Retreat for sharing their insight and helping us better understand the difference a managed approach can make in serving our unhoused community. You could find this episode and future ones on the city's YouTube page and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We plan to release new episodes twice a month following council meetings. I'm Aaron Kubik. Thank you for being part of the Grants Pass community and listening to The Update, where Grants Pass stays informed, engaged, and moving forward together.